Chapter 9 is called Never Argue with a Grown Up. Long after their parents went to sleep, Coke and Pep were still sitting on a bench outside the RV, whispering in the dark. We can't go to Washington, Coke said. Mrs. Higgins or Archie Clone or those bowler dudes will be waiting for us. They may even be working together. We're playing right into their hands. It's a suicide mission. What do you think would happen if we didn't show up in Washington on July 3rd? Pep wondered. What if we just turned around now and went home? Do you think they'd follow us? I don't I don't know, Coke said. They seem pretty determined, but who knows? Maybe they just cross us off their list of Genius Files kids and move on to the next name. They have lots of other kids to worry about, Pep said hopefully. Dr. Warsaw told us there were hundreds of kids in the Genius Files program. The odds are sure to be better for us if we went home than if we continued on to Washington, said Coke. And if they did come after us in California, at least we'd have home field advantage. But how are we going to talk mom and dad into letting us go home? Pep asked. Every time we tell them that people are trying to kill us, they think we're just joking. Leave it to me, Coke replied. I can talk dad into anything. It was after midnight when the twins finally went to bed. In the morning, Mrs. McDonald made some eggs on the little stove in the RV and toasted some English muffins. It was a rare treat. Usually, breakfast on the road was cold cereal. After they cleaned up the dishes, Coke and Pep pulled their father off to the side near the volleyball court. Dad, Coke said very seriously, we need to talk to you about something. Is everything okay? Dr. McDonald asked, concerned. Everything's fine, Coke said quietly, but we want to turn back. We want to go home. What? Dr. McDonald asked, surprised. Why? This is a great vacation. Aren't you kids having fun? Sure, we are, Dad, Pep said. It's just that uh, we're homesick, Coke said. Coke had decided to play the homesick card. Parents are suckers for homesickness. It means your kids like being home so much that nowhere else compares. It means you must be a terrific parent to have raised wonderful kids who like being in your house. It means you have created a lovely atmosphere for your children. It pulls at the heartstrings. Home is where the heart is. Home, sweet home. A kid can't miss playing the homesick card. I miss my friends, Pep added with her best puppy dog face, and I have a ton of summer reading to do, Coke said. I'm worried that I won't be able to finish it before school starts up again. We just want to go home, Pep said. The McDonald twins were not lying. They were homesick. They did miss their friends. They had summer reading assignments. It might not have been the whole truth, but telling their parents the whole truth hadn't worked. So it was time to try a different strategy. Pep's watery eyes were not filled with fake tears. Dr. McDonald put an arm around each of his children. Kids, he said, do you know how far we've traveled on this trip? More than 2,000 miles. That's a long way. Right now, we're only about 500 miles from Washington. We've come so far. We know, Dad, Coke said, but don't you want to see the nation's capital? Dr. McDonald continued. The Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, the White House, the Smithsonian. Believe me, you're going to remember the things that happen on this trip for the rest of your lives. I'll say, Coke agreed. But Dad, Pep said before her father cut her off, tell me, what do you think would have happened if Thomas Edison had tried just a few filaments for his light bulb and said, forget it. It's not worth the efforts. Candles give off enough light. We'd still be using candles today, Pep guessed. That's right, her father said. Dr. McDonald was using the time honored what if strategy. Kids are suckers for the what if strategy. The parents make outlandish comparisons with the current situation, and the kids don't realize the two situations are totally different. It works every time. What if, Dr. McDonald asked, Lewis and Clark had stopped in the middle of Iowa and said, okay, we get the idea. We've seen enough amber waves of grain and purple mountain majesties. And what if Neil Armstrong had stopped halfway to the moon and decided that one small half step for man was good enough? What if Magellan had turned back when he was halfway around the world? He would have he would have survived, Dad, Coke said. Magellan died before he could circle the globe. He was murdered in the Philippines. You know what I mean, Dr. McDonald said. The point is that you don't start a job and quit in the middle. That's just not right, and it's not American way. If you start something, you should finish it. Coke had a pained look on his face. This wasn't going to at all as he planned. He hadn't counted on his dad pulling the old what if strategy right after he played the homesick card. He didn't know what to say next. That was the problem with arguing against the parents. They had so much more experience at it. Coke had to try something else. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Dad, he said, I don't feel very well. It's my stomach. I don't want to ruin the trip for everyone, but I think it's cancer. I'm probably dying. I need to go home and spend my final days there. Yes, nothing tops the old I'm dying trick. Wait a minute, Dr. McDonald said, taking his arm off Coke's shoulder. First, you said you need to go home to do your summer reading, and now you say you have to go home because you're dying? I really want to finish my summer reading before I die, Coke explained. Like you said, it's the American way to finish what you started. At that point, Mrs. McDonald came ambling over. What's going on? She asked. It's time to get the show on the road. I'm anxious to see Ohio. The kids say they don't want to go to Washington, her husband said glumly. They want to turn around and go home. Oh, and Coke thinks he's sick and he's gonna die. Out of the question, Mrs. McDonald said immediately. We can't go home now. Aunt Judy is my only sister. When we were little girls, we promised we would each be at each other's weddings. She came to mine 14 years ago, so I have to be there for hers. We promise. I haven't seen Judy in so long, I barely even remember what she looks like. What if you and Dad went to Aunt Judy's wedding and Pep and I caught a flight home? Coke suggested lamely. He knew he had lost the argument, but it was worth a try anyway. We're not sending you home alone, Mrs. McDonald said. You're too young to be alone. The four of us are going to Washington. We're a family. That's all there is to it. End of story. And if you die, you're in big trouble, mister. Mothers have a way of ending debates. Silently, the twins climbed back into the RV. They would be going all the way to Washington, and they couldn't do anything about it. They would have to make the best of it.